The mind is a complex and powerful force that shapes how we see the world and interact with others. Our thoughts, behaviours, and decisions are often influenced by psychological processes that we aren't even aware of. By understanding how these processes work, we can gain greater insight into why we act the way we do. Let's explore some fascinating psychological facts that will give you a deeper understanding of the human mind. 1. The brain can process visual information in less than 1/10th of a second. The brain is an incredibly fast processor. When you look at something, your brain is able to analyze and interpret visual data almost instantaneously. In less than 100 milliseconds, 1/10th of a second, your brain begins to process the image, interpret shapes, colors, and even emotional cues from a face or scene. This rapid processing helps us react quickly to our environment, which was crucial for survival in the past. This ability to absorb and act on visual information so swiftly also explains why people can quickly pick out patterns or detect threats, even in unfamiliar situations. 2. People are more likely to act aggressively when they feel their status is threatened. Status and social standing are deeply ingrained in the brain's social circuits. When a person's status or sense of power is threatened, whether in a conversation, a workplace, or a social setting, the brain reacts with stress and a defensive response. Aggression often follows because the brain sees this as a threat to one's place in the social hierarchy. This is why people may become defensive or lash out when they feel disrespected or overlooked. The brain is primed to protect one's position in society, and if that position is threatened, the body responds with fight or flight instincts, often leading to aggressive behaviour. 3. People are more likely to act out of character when they're in a large group. De-individuation is the psychological phenomenon where people in large groups tend to lose their sense of individual identity and self-restraint. In such environments, the brain is less concerned with personal accountability, which can lead to behaviour that is out of character. The larger the group, the less an individual feels personally responsible for their actions. This is why crowds can sometimes act in ways that seem out of place or extreme. The anonymity provided by a group setting leads to a loss of inhibitions, and people may engage in risky or even aggressive behaviour that they wouldn't consider on their own. 4. The brain is highly influenced by first impressions. The halo effect refers to the tendency to make broad assumptions about someone based on a single characteristic. When you meet someone for the first time, your brain will often form an overall judgment based on a single factor, such as their appearance or mannerisms. If someone is attractive, for example, you're more likely to assume they are also intelligent, kind and capable, even if you have no other evidence to support these assumptions. First impressions are powerful because the brain is always seeking shortcuts to make sense of new information quickly. Once a first impression is formed, it is difficult for the brain to reconsider it, and this initial judgment can colour how we see a person for a long time. 5. People remember emotional experiences more vividly than neutral ones. The brain prioritizes memories linked to strong emotions. When something happens that makes you feel particularly happy, sad, scared, or angry, the brain releases chemicals like dopamine and cortisol to solidify the memory, making it more vivid and easier to recall. This emotional imprint helps humans learn from experiences and avoid danger in the future. For example, traumatic events tend to stay in the memory longer because the brain treats them as high priority, potentially life-threatening experiences. On the other hand, everyday neutral events fade from memory because they don't trigger the same emotional response. 6. Your brain is more likely to believe something if it's repeated. The mere exposure effect explains why repetition makes things seem more truthful. The brain naturally assumes that something repeated over time must be accurate or trustworthy, even if it isn't. This is why advertising works so well. Repeated exposure to a brand or message can convince people to buy a product, even if they don't have any direct evidence of its quality. The more familiar something feels, the more the brain perceives it as reliable, even if it's based on little to no factual evidence. This is why constant exposure to misinformation can lead to its acceptance as truth. 7. People's behaviour changes when they feel anonymous. When people feel they are not being observed, whether in large crowds, online, or under the cover of anonymity, de-individuation occurs, and they tend to act less inhibited. The brain reacts differently when an individual is anonymous, removing the self-monitoring that typically regulates behaviour. This is why people sometimes engage in behaviours they wouldn't normally consider when they feel anonymous, such as aggressive actions, risky behaviour, or even online trolling. Without the fear of social consequences, the brain loses some of its ethical restraints, leading to actions driven more by emotion than reason. 8. The brain adapts more easily to negative information than positive. Humans are wired to prioritise negative information, a phenomenon known as negativity bias. This bias evolved as a survival mechanism to help our ancestors quickly detect and respond to potential threats in the environment. In today's world, this tendency can cause us to focus more on criticism, mistakes, or setbacks than on our successes or positive feedback. The brain processes negative information more deeply and with greater emotional intensity, which can make it harder to overcome bad experiences and easier to dwell on them. This is why negative comments often stick with us longer than positive ones. 9. Your brain works differently when you're sleep deprived. Sleep deprivation impacts cognitive performance significantly. When you don't get enough sleep, the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for higher cognitive functions like decision-making and impulse control, becomes less active. At the same time, the amygdala, which processes emotions like fear and stress, becomes more reactive. This shift in brain activity makes you more likely to make impulsive decisions, act on emotion, and struggle with concentration. The brain is essentially less capable of processing information clearly and calmly when you're tired, which is why decisions made when sleep deprived tend to be more reckless or emotional. 10. People tend to be more generous when they feel gratitude. Gratitude activates the brain's reward system, releasing dopamine and oxytocin, the feel-good chemicals. These chemicals promote positive social behaviours, making people more likely to help others when they feel grateful. Research has shown that when you express gratitude, it not only boosts your own happiness, but also encourages pro-social behaviour in those around you. People who feel thankful are more likely to engage in acts of kindness, such as volunteering or offering support to others, because gratitude enhances the brain's motivation to create positive interactions. 11. The brain doesn't differentiate between physical and emotional pain. Studies have shown that both physical and emotional pain activate the same areas of the brain, particularly the anterior cingulate cortex. This region is responsible for processing both types of pain, which is why the brain experiences emotional distress as physically painful. For example, social rejection or the loss of a loved one can feel as intensely painful as a physical injury. This connection between emotional and physical pain helps explain why emotional wounds can be just as debilitating as physical ones, affecting everything from mood to overall health. 12. People are more likely to act generously when they see others acting generously. This is an example of social contagion, the idea that emotions and behaviours spread like a virus within social groups. The brain tends to mirror the actions of others, particularly in group settings. When you see someone do something kind or generous, your brain releases oxytocin, encouraging similar behaviours in yourself. This is why acts of kindness often snowball. Generosity creates a positive feedback loop where others are inspired to act generously in return. Social contagion can be a powerful force for good which is why movements of collective action or charity often gain momentum quickly. 13. People's choices are often influenced by subtle environmental cues. Our decisions are frequently influenced by priming, a psychological phenomenon where exposure to one stimulus affects the response to another, often without conscious awareness. For example, research has shown that people are more likely to donate to charity if they're first exposed to words related to kindness or generosity, even if those words are unrelated to the cause. The brain is highly responsive to these subtle cues, making us more likely to make decisions based on external environmental factors, even when we think we're making choices independently. 14. Your brain can adapt to higher levels of stress with time. While stress can be debilitating in the short term, the brain can adapt to chronic stress over time through a process known as allostasis. The brain recalibrates itself to cope with ongoing stress, which can improve its ability to manage pressure. However, constant high levels of stress can also lead to wear and tear on the body and brain, increasing the risk of mental health issues like anxiety, depression, and cognitive decline. The brain's ability to adapt can be beneficial in the short term, but over time, it's important to manage stress levels to avoid long-term harm. 15. People often act based on how they believe others perceive them. The looking glass self is a concept in social psychology that suggests people shape their self-concept based on how they believe others perceive them. The brain is highly attuned to social feedback, and this influences how we view ourselves. When we think others see us positively, our self-esteem rises, but when we believe others view us negatively, our self-esteem drops. This constant reflection can lead to significant changes in behaviour as we try to align our actions with the expectations and perceptions of those around us. 16. Your brain processes information faster than you realise. The brain is an incredibly efficient organ, processing information at speeds that exceed our conscious awareness. Neural impulses travel at speeds of up to 268 miles per hour, allowing the brain to absorb and respond to external stimuli almost instantaneously. For example, when you touch a hot surface, your brain has already signaled your muscles to pull away before you consciously realize the pain. This incredible processing speed helps the brain react quickly to danger and make split-second decisions. However, the brain's rapid processing also contributes to biases, as it often relies on automatic thinking rather than rational deliberation, especially in fast-moving or emotionally charged situations. 17. People are more likely to engage in risky behaviour when they're in groups. The presence of others can influence decision-making in profound ways. Social influence plays a huge role in behaviour, and the brain often makes decisions based on what others are doing, especially in uncertain situations. This phenomenon is known as group polarization, where individuals in groups tend to make more extreme decisions than they would on their own. Whether it's engaging in reckless behaviour, making impulsive decisions, or even embracing extreme ideas, the brain's desire to conform and gain approval from others often leads people to take risks they might avoid when alone. This is why risky behaviour like drinking, gambling, or thrill-seeking can escalate in group settings. 18. The human brain has a natural bias toward overestimating future happiness. The impact bias refers to the brain's tendency to overestimate how good or bad future events will make us feel. When we anticipate an event, whether it's a promotion, a vacation, or a new relationship, we imagine that the outcome will bring us a greater sense of happiness than it actually does. Once the event occurs, the brain tends to adapt to the new situation, and the happiness it brings often fades faster than expected. This is why even major achievements can sometimes feel less fulfilling once they're realized. The brain's tendency to overestimate emotional outcomes is driven by its need to predict and prepare for the future, but it often leads to disappointment when reality doesn't match the imagined scenario. 19. People are more likely to help others when they see others helping. Social proof is a powerful motivator for behaviour, especially in helping situations. The brain is more likely to engage in pro-social behaviour when it observes others doing the same. When you see someone helping a person in need, your brain releases dopamine, reinforcing the behaviour and making you more likely to act similarly. This is why volunteerism, charitable giving, and community-driven efforts often become contagious. Witnessing acts of kindness can inspire others to contribute. Social proof makes people feel more comfortable helping because it signals that the behaviour is accepted and valued in the community. 20. Your brain tends to prioritise bad news over good news. This is another manifestation of negativity bias, where the brain gives more weight to negative information than positive. Negative experiences, information, or events tend to have a greater psychological impact, and they're remembered more vividly. For example, after a positive meeting, one piece of negative feedback can overshadow the entire experience. The brain processes negative stimuli with more intensity because it is designed to prioritize threats to our survival. This bias helped our ancestors stay alert to dangers, but in today's world, it can lead to overthinking or rumination on negative events, making it harder to enjoy positive experiences. 21. Your brain is capable of changing even the smallest detail in your memories. The brain doesn't store memories like a video recorder. Instead, memories are reconstructed every time you recall them. This process is influenced by both the passage of time and new experiences. Each time you think about a past event, the brain pulls from your existing knowledge, beliefs, and emotions, which can lead to subtle, or not so subtle, alterations in the memory. This is why people often misremember details or distort past events, especially when they are influenced by suggestion or external factors. Our memories aren't as accurate as we think, and over time, the brain's natural reconstruction process can cause us to change the details without even realizing it. 22. People's decisions are often influenced by the way options are framed. This is known as the framing effect, where people make different choices depending on how options are presented, even if the underlying facts are the same. For example, people are more likely to choose a product when it's presented as 90% fat-free than when it's presented as 10% fat. The brain tends to focus on positive framing, even when the two pieces of information are functionally equivalent. This bias is used in marketing, advertising, and even politics to influence decisions. The way information is framed activates certain parts of the brain, which can shape our choices and lead us to prioritize certain options over others. 23. People are more likely to trust those who mirror their body language. The brain reads nonverbal cues to assess whether someone is trustworthy or similar to you. When a person mirrors your body language, whether it's crossing their legs in the same way, leaning forward when you do, or mimicking your gestures, it signals that they are empathetic and aligned with your emotional state. This is why people tend to feel more comfortable around those who subconsciously mirror their movements. Mirror neurons in the brain allow us to mimic others and feel their emotions as our own, creating a sense of connection and trust. This phenomenon is often used in social interactions to build rapport and establish relationships. 24. Your brain can get addicted to uncertainty. While we often think of addiction in terms of substances like alcohol or drugs, uncertainty can also become an addictive experience for the brain. The unknown creates a sense of excitement and anticipation, leading the brain to release dopamine in response to the unpredictability of outcomes. This is why people sometimes get caught in cycles of checking their phones, waiting for an exciting event to happen, or seeking out unpredictable situations like gambling. 25. Your brain can freeze when faced with overwhelming choices. When presented with a large number of choices, the brain becomes overwhelmed and can struggle to make a decision. This phenomenon, known as decision paralysis, occurs because the brain has to work harder to weigh the potential outcomes of each option. The more choices you have, the more time and energy the brain spends comparing them, which often leads to confusion or frustration. This is why many people end up procrastinating or choosing the easiest, most familiar option when faced with too many choices. Research has shown that simplifying choices can lead to better decision-making, as it reduces cognitive load and allows the brain to make faster, more confident decisions. 26. The brain can't distinguish between physical and emotional pain. When you experience emotional pain, such as heartbreak or social rejection, the brain processes it using the same regions that are activated when you feel physical pain. Studies have shown that rejection and emotional hurt activate the anterior cingulate cortex, which is the area of the brain responsible for processing both emotional and physical pain. This connection helps explain why emotional distress can feel just as intense and debilitating as physical injury. The brain doesn't see a clear boundary between emotional and physical suffering, which can make negative emotional experiences feel physically overwhelming. 27. People are more likely to take risks when they are in a group. When individuals are in a group setting, they are more likely to engage in risky behaviour than when they are alone. This happens due to diffusion of responsibility, where the individual feels less accountable for their actions because they're part of a collective. The brain perceives less personal responsibility and places more emphasis on the social rewards of fitting in with the group. In group settings, peer pressure, social validation, and a desire to conform often push people to take risks they might avoid in isolation. This explains why people may engage in dangerous or reckless behaviours, like driving fast, gambling, or experimenting with drugs when in the presence of others. 28. Your brain is wired to pay more attention to negative stimuli. The negativity bias is a fundamental feature of the human brain. It refers to the tendency for people to pay more attention to, remember, and be influenced by negative experiences than positive ones. This bias is thought to have evolved to help early humans avoid danger. Negative experiences, such as a threat or bad news, are perceived as more urgent and need to be remembered to avoid future harm. In modern life, this bias means that people are more likely to dwell on criticism, stressful events or failures, and often struggle to fully appreciate positive events. Recognizing the negativity bias can help individuals shift focus to the good things in their lives, fostering better mental health and well-being. 29. People's moods can be influenced by the colour of their environment. The colour of the spaces around you can have a profound impact on your mood and behaviour. Colours like red and yellow are associated with heightened energy, passion, and urgency, while blue and green are linked to calmness and relaxation. These colour associations happen because different colours stimulate the brain in various ways, influencing hormones and emotional responses. For example, the colour blue can lower heart rates and reduce stress, which is why it's often used in bedrooms and hospitals. On the other hand, red increases heart rate and stimulates excitement, which is why it's often used in warning signs or in environments where alertness is required, like restaurants or gyms. 30. Your brain tends to generalize based on first impressions. When you meet someone for the first time, your brain quickly forms a judgment about them based on limited information. This is called the halo effect, where the brain tends to generalize a person's traits based on one positive characteristic. If someone is attractive, for instance, your brain might assume they're also kind, intelligent, or trustworthy, even if you have no proof to support those traits. First impressions are formed rapidly, and once they're established, the brain has a tendency to hold on to them, making it difficult to change those perceptions later on. This tendency can lead to unfair judgments and biases, both positive and negative. 31. People's memories can be shaped by the emotions they associate with an event. Emotions play a significant role in how the brain encodes memories. When you experience an event that evokes a strong emotional reaction, the brain releases hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, which help strengthen the memory. These memories are more vivid and easier to recall than those that are neutral or lack strong emotional connections. For instance, a wedding or graduation may be remembered in great detail because of the positive emotions associated with the event, while a routine day at work might fade into the background. Emotional experiences create stronger connections in the brain, making them more accessible when you try to remember them later. 32. People are more likely to take advice from someone they see as similar to themselves. The brain is more likely to trust and take advice from someone who appears similar to us in terms of background, experiences, or appearance. This is due to the brain's natural inclination to seek out social validation. When someone seems like us, we're more likely to believe they understand our perspective and motivations. This is why people often seek advice from friends or peers rather than experts, because they feel a sense of connection and trust with those who seem to share their experiences. This similarity bias can influence everything from personal relationships to professional decisions, as the brain tends to trust the opinions of those who feel familiar and relatable. 33. The brain uses stories to make sense of the world. Humans are natural storytellers, and the brain processes information more effectively when it's presented in narrative form. This is because the brain organizes experiences into stories, linking events together with a beginning, middle, and end. Storytelling makes complex information easier to understand, remember, and relate to. It also taps into emotional and social parts of the brain, making it more engaging. This is why movies, books, and even social media posts that tell stories are more compelling than dry facts or data. People are more likely to act on or remember information when it's presented as part of a story because it helps the brain relate to the content and find meaning. 34. Your brain creates its own version of reality based on past experiences. The brain doesn't perceive the world as it is. Instead, it creates a subjective version of reality based on past experiences, biases, and expectations. This phenomenon, known as perceptual filtering, means that two people can look at the same situation and interpret it in completely different ways. For example, someone who has had negative experiences with a particular group might feel threatened by their behaviour, while someone without those experiences might see the same actions as benign. The brain constantly adjusts how it processes sensory information, influenced by what you've seen, heard, or experienced in the past, which is why two people can perceive the same event so differently. 35. Your brain naturally seeks out patterns even when they don't exist. The brain is highly attuned to identifying patterns in the world around us. This ability is essential for survival, as recognizing patterns helps predict future events, such as the presence of danger or finding food. However, the brain is so good at finding patterns that it often creates connections where none exist. This is why people sometimes see faces in clouds, hear hidden messages in music, or believe in superstitions. The brain's pattern-seeking ability can lead to false positives, where the brain mistakenly believes it has identified a meaningful pattern, even when there's no actual connection. 36. People are more likely to engage in risky behaviour when they're feeling emotionally numb. When people experience emotional numbness or a sense of detachment, the brain is less likely to evaluate risks and consequences rationally. Emotional numbness can occur during periods of intense stress, depression, or burnout, and it leads to a reduction in self-regulation. This emotional disconnection can make individuals more susceptible to engaging in risky or harmful behaviours, such as substance use, reckless driving, or risky sexual behaviour, because they don't feel the emotional weight of those actions. The brain's reward system may also be involved, as individuals seek out external stimuli to feel something when they are disconnected from their emotions. The human mind is one of the most intricate and complex systems in nature, constantly shaping how we experience the world. While we may think we know ourselves, there are countless psychological forces working beneath the surface that guide our thoughts, actions, and decisions. Let's dive into some psychological facts that shed light on why we do what we do, often without realizing it. 1. Your brain uses emotions to prioritize information. When your brain processes information, it doesn't treat all data equally. Emotional experiences are stored more vividly than neutral ones because the brain is wired to prioritize emotional information. This evolutionary adaptation helped humans remember and react quickly to potentially life-threatening events. Today, this system still works to our advantage by highlighting emotional content, whether positive or negative, so we can respond quickly to what's important. For example, if you have an emotional reaction to a particular story, that event will likely stick in your mind far longer than an event that didn't evoke any strong feelings. 2. Your body language can influence your emotions. It's a well-known fact that emotions can affect body language, but what's fascinating is that the opposite is true as well. Your body language can influence your emotions. When you adopt a confident posture, standing tall with your shoulders back and chin up, your brain will actually send signals to your body that reinforce feelings of confidence. Conversely, slumping or crossing your arms can make you feel more closed off or insecure. This is why body language is often used by therapists, public speakers, and performers to change their mindset or increase engagement. The mind and body are deeply interconnected. 3. People are more likely to help others when they feel they are being watched. The presence of an observer can significantly influence behaviour. When people believe they are being watched, whether by another person or even just a camera, they are more likely to engage in pro-social behaviour, like helping others or following social norms. This is due to the brain's awareness of social accountability. Knowing that others are watching makes people more conscious of their actions and motivates them to act in a way that aligns with societal expectations. This phenomenon is often used in behaviour modification strategies, such as public service announcements or marketing campaigns. 4. Memory is not as reliable as we think. Many people assume that memory works like a perfect recording system, capturing every detail of every experience. In reality, memory is much more flexible and prone to distortion. When we recall an event, the brain does not replay it like a video. Instead, it reconstructs the memory based on fragments of information. These memories can be altered by various factors, such as time, suggestion, or even our emotional state at the time of recall. This is why eyewitness testimonies can be unreliable and why people often remember events differently from others involved in the same situation. 5. People's behaviour can change depending on the way information is presented. The way information is framed can dramatically alter people's decisions. This is known as the framing effect, a cognitive bias, where people's choices are influenced by how information is presented, rather than the actual content of the information itself. For example, if a medical procedure is described as having a 90% survival rate, people are more likely to accept it than if it's described as having a 10% mortality rate, even though both statements convey the same information. The brain is sensitive to framing, making it easier to manipulate decisions and opinions by changing how facts are presented. 6. Your brain is constantly making assumptions about the world. Every second, your brain processes vast amounts of information. To cope with this influx, it creates assumptions and mental shortcuts to quickly make sense of what's happening. These assumptions are based on past experiences, learned patterns, and expectations. However, while these shortcuts are efficient, they can also lead to biases. For instance, the confirmation bias makes you more likely to accept information that supports what you already believe, while dismissing anything that contradicts your views. Your brain's constant need to fill in gaps can shape your perception of reality, sometimes leading you to false conclusions. 7. People tend to be more generous when they feel appreciated. The brain's reward system is activated when we feel appreciated. When you receive a genuine compliment or recognition for your efforts, the brain releases dopamine, the feel-good neurotransmitter. This increase in dopamine makes you feel more positive and valued, which in turn encourages you to give back or reciprocate. This is why people who feel valued by others are more likely to help or contribute in social situations. Appreciation fuels generosity because it strengthens the sense of connection and reinforces positive feelings toward others. 8. Social media can hijack your brain's reward system. Social media platforms are designed to keep you hooked by leveraging the brain's natural reward system. Every like, share, or comment you receive triggers a release of dopamine, the same chemical released when you experience something pleasurable. This constant feedback loop can create an addiction to social validation, where you seek more likes or attention to maintain that dopamine rush. The unpredictability of social media, where sometimes you get more attention and sometimes less, mimics the brain's response to gambling, which is why it can be so hard to disconnect. 9. People tend to underestimate their ability to change. One of the most common misconceptions is that we are stuck with our personality traits or behaviors. The brain, however, is incredibly adaptable. Through neuroplasticity, the brain constantly rewires itself, allowing us to change habits, behaviors, and even aspects of our personality. While change can be challenging, particularly if it involves overcoming deeply ingrained patterns, it is entirely possible. The key lies in creating new neural pathways through consistent effort, self-reflection, and new experiences. With practice, what once felt difficult or impossible can become second nature. 10. People's perception of time changes depending on their age. As people grow older, they often perceive time as moving faster. This is because as you age, you accumulate more experiences, which makes each individual event seem smaller in comparison. When you're young, each year is a larger proportion of your life, making time feel slower. However, as you get older, each year represents a smaller fraction of your life, which accelerates your perception of time. This is why people often feel like time flies as they age. There are fewer new experiences to help slow the clock. 11. People are more likely to act on instinct when they're tired. When you're fatigued, your brain's decision-making capabilities decrease. The prefrontal cortex, which helps you reason and plan, doesn't function as well when you're tired, leading to more impulsive decisions. This is why people tend to make poorer choices when they haven't slept enough, whether it's eating junk food, skipping an important task, or engaging in risky behaviors. Your brain is less capable of considering long-term consequences when it's exhausted, focusing instead on immediate gratification or relief. 12. People are more likely to change their behavior when they feel accountable. When people feel personally accountable for their actions, they are more likely to act ethically and responsibly. Accountability triggers the brain's self-regulation system, making you more aware of your decisions and actions. This is why people are more likely to follow rules in a work setting when there are clear expectations and consequences. Accountability encourages us to stay aligned with our values, helping to reduce temptation or misconduct. 13. Emotions can influence your decision-making in ways you don't realize. The brain processes emotions and logic in different parts. Emotions often influence decisions more strongly than reason, especially in situations of uncertainty. Even when people believe they are making rational choices, their emotions often play a significant role. For instance, fear can make you avoid risks, while happiness might make you more willing to take chances. These emotional undercurrents shape decision-making by influencing how we assess options, even when we think we're being objective. 14. The brain prefers to focus on the negative to ensure survival. Our brains are evolutionarily wired to focus on potential threats more than positive stimuli. This negativity bias helped early humans survive. By prioritizing dangers, such as predators or environmental hazards, over things that might be safe or enjoyable. As a result, negative experiences often leave a stronger imprint on memory, and people are more likely to notice bad news or threats in their environment. While this bias was crucial for survival, it can lead to feelings of anxiety or stress in modern life, where threats are often less immediate or tangible. 15. People often misjudge their emotional state because of body sensations. The brain often misinterprets physical sensations as emotions. For instance, when your heart races or your palms sweat, you may interpret it as anxiety, even if the sensation is just from physical exertion. This is because the brain doesn't always differentiate between emotional and physical states, so it assigns emotional meaning to physical cues. This can lead to misdiagnosing how you feel and may explain why some people experience physical symptoms before they fully realize they're stressed or anxious. 16. The brain can quickly adapt to new environments. When you step into a new environment, the brain begins processing everything differently to help you adjust. It reorganizes itself to prioritize the most relevant information, such as learning new social norms, figuring out patterns, or even memorizing new routes to work. Neuroplasticity enables this adjustment, helping people integrate into new cultures, cities, or jobs with relative ease. The more time you spend in a new environment, the quicker your brain adapts and creates new cognitive shortcuts. 17. Dopamine is the brain's motivation chemical. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that plays a key role in motivation, pleasure, and reward. It's released when you accomplish something significant or anticipate a reward. This is why the brain is motivated to achieve goals. It's not just about the outcome, but about the process of achieving it. Dopamine gives you the push to keep going, whether it's finishing a project, getting a promotion, or even completing small tasks throughout the day. This system is part of the brain's reward circuit and encourages you to repeat behaviors that bring you pleasure or satisfaction. 18. Your brain's attention span is much shorter than you think. Research has shown that the average attention span for an adult is roughly 20 minutes. This means that after 20 minutes of intense focus, your brain begins to struggle to maintain concentration. This is why many people feel the need to take breaks after a short period of focused work, whether it's a walk, a snack, or just changing tasks. The brain can only concentrate it for so long before it needs to rest and refresh in order to stay productive. 19. People tend to follow the behavior of others in uncertain situations. Humans are inherently social creatures, and when we are unsure of how to behave, we instinctively look to others for cues. This is known as social proof, a psychological phenomenon where we assume the actions of others are correct because we believe others have more information or experience. This behavior is amplified in situations where we feel uncertain or anxious. For example, if you're in a foreign country and unsure about how to behave in a particular setting, you're likely to observe the behavior of locals or fellow travelers and mimic it. This social mimicry allows you to fit in and avoid feeling out of place, but it also highlights how we rely on external validation to guide our actions. 20. Your brain reacts to rejection in the same way it reacts to physical pain. Social rejection can be just as painful as physical injury. When you experience emotional rejection, whether it's being excluded from a group or turned down for a job, the brain's pain centers are activated, triggering the same neural pathways as when you stub your toe or suffer a cut. This reaction is believed to be an evolutionary mechanism designed to encourage social cohesion and group bonding. Being ostracized or excluded threatens survival in our evolutionary past, so the brain treats it with the same level of distress as physical harm. This is why rejection can feel like a physical wound, making it harder to cope with in the short term. 21. People tend to perform better when they believe they can succeed. This concept, known as self-efficacy, is one of the key drivers of motivation. When you believe that your efforts will lead to success, your brain releases dopamine, the chemical associated with motivation and pleasure. This chemical boost encourages you to keep pushing forward, creating a positive feedback loop that fuels further efforts. However, when people lack self-efficacy, when they doubt their abilities or feel incapable of achieving their goals, this can lead to a lack of motivation, self-doubt, and ultimately, failure. The belief in your own ability to succeed is critical for maintaining motivation and achieving long-term goals. 22. The brain prioritizes negative emotions for survival. The brain has evolved to respond to negative emotions more strongly than positive ones, a concept known as negativity bias. This bias developed as a survival mechanism, helping humans pay more attention to potential threats than to pleasant experiences. For example, if you hear a rustling in the bushes, your brain immediately focuses on the possibility of danger, such as a predator, rather than the chance of finding food or a pleasant experience. This heightened sensitivity to negative stimuli made it easier for early humans to react quickly to threats and ensure their survival. However, in modern life, this bias can make people overly focused on the negative aspects of situations, leading to unnecessary stress or anxiety. 23. People tend to overestimate their ability to multitask. Multitasking is a common practice in modern life, but the brain is actually not very good at it. When you think you're multitasking, switching between several tasks at once, your brain is actually rapidly shifting attention between tasks, which reduces efficiency. Studies have shown that multitasking leads to more mistakes, increased mental fatigue, and slower task completion. The brain's attention span is limited, and each time you switch tasks, there's a cognitive cost to refocusing. While it might seem like you're being more productive, multitasking can actually harm performance. Focusing on one task at a time allows the brain to engage fully, leading to higher quality work and greater overall efficiency. 24. People are more likely to follow social norms when they're in large groups. Human behaviour is often shaped by the social context in which we find ourselves. Conformity plays a significant role, especially in larger groups. The brain is wired to seek social acceptance, and in a crowd, the pressure to conform increases. This is due to a psychological phenomenon called normative social influence, where individuals conform to group norms to avoid social rejection or discomfort. This pressure to conform can be seen in everything from fashion trends to opinions on social issues. The larger the group, the stronger the tendency to conform, even if an individual personally disagrees with the group's behaviour. This is why groupthink can occur in organisations or political movements, where individuals adopt a group stance without critically assessing it. 25. The brain processes visual information faster than verbal information. Humans are inherently visual creatures. Our brains process images 60,000 times faster than words, which explains why visuals can have such a powerful impact on our emotions and perceptions. When you look at an image, your brain can immediately extract important details, such as the emotional state of a person, the environment's mood, or the overall message without needing to process words. This is why advertisements, movies, and visual art can evoke such strong emotional responses. The brain can interpret visual stimuli with incredible speed and accuracy, making images a more effective means of communication than words in many cases. 26. People are more likely to help others when they're in a good mood. Positive emotions have a direct impact on pro-social behaviour. When you feel happy or content, your brain is more likely to engage the empathy centres, making you more attuned to the needs of others. This emotional state increases the likelihood of offering help, whether it's something as small as holding the door for someone or as significant as volunteering your time for a cause. The brain's dopamine and oxytocin release when helping others creates a sense of satisfaction, reinforcing the desire to continue doing good deeds. Conversely, when you're feeling stressed or negative, you may find it harder to offer help because your brain is focused more on self-preservation than on helping others. 27. Your brain struggles with ambiguity. Ambiguity creates a discomfort because the brain craves clarity. Humans evolved to make quick, efficient decisions based on available information, but when faced with uncertainty, the brain experiences anxiety. This discomfort leads people to either avoid ambiguous situations altogether or make decisions based on incomplete or biased information. For example, when you don't know whether a person likes you, your brain fills in the gaps with negative assumptions, leading to stress or unnecessary worry. The discomfort with ambiguity can drive people to seek certainty, sometimes at the expense of making informed decisions. This is why clear communication and transparency are so important in relationships, workplaces, and society as a whole. 28. Your brain can become addicted to certain behaviours. Addiction isn't just about substances like drugs or alcohol. Habitual behaviours can become addictive as well. The brain's reward system is heavily involved in reinforcing habits, whether they are positive or negative. Behaviours that release dopamine, like checking your phone for notifications, playing video games, or even eating junk food, can create a cycle of reinforcement. Over time, the brain begins to crave these behaviours, seeking out the reward or positive reinforcement associated with them. This is why people can become addicted to things like social media, shopping, or even gambling. The brain is trained to seek out repeated stimulation that leads to emotional satisfaction, reinforcing the desire to engage in the behaviour again and again. 29. Your brain is constantly predicting and correcting your movements. Your brain doesn't simply react to your surroundings, it predicts them. Before you move, the brain sends out predictions about what will happen based on your body's current state and past experiences. This allows you to make quick adjustments and act fluidly. For example, when you reach for a cup, your brain predicts the distance, angle, and speed needed to grab it, and it adjusts your movement as needed. If you were to unexpectedly miss the cup, your brain would quickly correct its prediction and make the necessary adjustments for the next attempt. This constant process of prediction and correction helps make everyday actions more efficient and precise. 30. People are more likely to remember information when it is presented as a story. Humans have an innate ability to connect with stories on a deep level. The brain responds to storytelling by creating stronger emotional and cognitive links to the information. This is because stories engage multiple regions of the brain at once, including those responsible for sensory processing, emotions, and memory. Whether it's a personal anecdote, a historical event, or a fictional narrative, the brain processes the information in a way that makes it more memorable. This is why marketers, educators, and leaders often use storytelling to communicate complex ideas. They know that people are more likely to remember and internalize information when it's framed as a compelling narrative. The human brain is a fascinating and complex organ, constantly shaping the way we experience life. Much of our behavior is influenced by psychological mechanisms that we often aren't even aware of. From the way we react to stress to how we make decisions, our minds are full of hidden forces. Let's explore some more psychological facts that might just change the way you see yourself and the world around you. 1. The brain processes fear faster than it processes logic. When faced with a fearful situation, your brain responds almost instantaneously. The amygdala, which is responsible for processing emotions like fear, reacts much faster than the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for logic and reasoning. This rapid response helped our ancestors survive by allowing them to react quickly to threats without the need for careful thought. However, in today's world, this system can sometimes lead to anxiety, impulsive decisions, or overreactions to situations that aren't as dangerous as they feel. Understanding this biological response can help you take a step back and allow your logical mind to catch up with your initial emotional reaction. 2. People are more likely to conform when they're in groups, especially if they feel uncertain. The brain is wired to seek social acceptance. When you're in a group, especially one that is unfamiliar or where you feel insecure, your brain is more likely to adopt the behavior and attitudes of the group. This phenomenon, called conformity, happens because the brain fears social rejection and seeks to fit in. Studies like the Ash conformity experiment have shown that even when people know the right answer, they will often give the wrong answer if they believe the group will disapprove. This happens because the brain places a high value on social harmony, sometimes overriding individual judgment. 3. Your brain works best when it's in a state of flow. Flow is a mental state where you're completely immersed in an activity, feeling energized, focused, and at your most productive. In this state, the brain releases dopamine, endorphins, and serotonin, chemicals that contribute to feelings of happiness and satisfaction. Flow happens when you're doing something challenging but not too difficult, allowing you to push your limits without overwhelming yourself. When you're in flow, you perform better and feel more engaged, which is why activities that get you into this state, like hobbies, sports, or creative projects, are so fulfilling. 4. People's behavior changes when they're watched, even if they know they're not being judged. This is an example of the Hawthorne effect, which occurs when individuals modify their behavior simply because they know they're being observed. The brain reacts to the knowledge of surveillance by becoming more self-conscious and conscientious, which often leads to better performance or more socially acceptable behavior. While this can be helpful in certain settings, like workplaces, it also highlights how our behavior can be influenced by external cues, even when those cues are not directly linked to judgment or evaluation. 5. Your brain releases stress hormones when you perceive someone else in distress. When you witness someone else experiencing stress or emotional pain, your brain can release stress hormones like cortisol in response. This phenomenon is called empathic stress or empathic concern, and it's a way the brain links you to the emotional state of others. This neural mirroring happens because of mirror neurons, which allow you to feel what others feel. This is why you might feel anxious or upset when you see someone else crying, or why you get stressed during tense situations involving other people. While empathy is crucial for social bonding, this emotional contagion can also be mentally exhausting. 6. Your brain often fills in the gaps in your memory with inaccurate details. The brain doesn't store memories like a video recorder. Instead, it creates constructive memories by piecing together fragments of past experiences. While this allows us to remember broad details, it also leaves room for error. When you recall an event, your brain will often fill in the blanks with assumptions or information from other sources, making the memory less reliable. This is why eyewitness testimony can be flawed, and why people often misremember details of their past. What you remember may be an altered version of what actually happened, influenced by current emotions or new information. 7. Humans are hardwired to be social, and isolation can have severe mental and physical effects. The human brain is socially programmed. We thrive in connected environments, and isolation can have serious consequences. Research has shown that prolonged social isolation can lead to depression, anxiety, and even physical health problems like weakened immune systems and increased blood pressure. The brain's reward system is activated by social interactions, and without them, it can begin to shut down, affecting mental well-being. This is why feeling isolated or lonely can trigger anxiety and sadness. Our brains are wired to need connection in order to feel stable and secure. 8. People tend to rely on their emotions more than logic when making decisions. While humans like to think of themselves as logical decision makers, research shows that emotions often have a stronger influence on our choices than reason. This is because the brain is designed to prioritize emotional responses, particularly when there is uncertainty or risk involved. The limbic system, which processes emotions, often takes precedence over the prefrontal cortex, which handles rational thought. This is why people sometimes make impulsive or seemingly irrational decisions. They're following their feelings rather than carefully weighing the pros and cons. 9. Your brain interprets silence as discomfort. Silence is often seen as an uncomfortable void that needs to be filled. The brain is wired to seek communication and connection, and when there's a lull in conversation, it can trigger discomfort, causing you to speak just to fill the silence. This is why many people struggle with long pauses in conversations, even when there's nothing important to say. Social interactions are driven by the brain's need to communicate, and silence can feel like a threat to that connection. In group settings, this discomfort can lead to small talk, filler words or topics designed to break the silence and keep the conversation flowing. 10. People often misjudge their level of control over situations. Humans tend to believe they have more control over events than they actually do. This is called the illusion of control, the tendency to overestimate our ability to influence outcomes. For example, people who gamble may believe that their actions, like picking a specific slot machine or rolling dice in a certain way, can affect their odds of winning. The brain is wired to seek patterns and causes, so it creates the false belief that we can control random events. This illusion can lead to risky behavior and poor decision-making because we believe we have more influence than we truly do. 11. The brain tends to focus on information that confirms existing beliefs. This is known as confirmation bias, the tendency to search for, interpret, and remember information in a way that confirms our pre-existing beliefs. This bias can make us ignore contradictory evidence and reinforce our current opinions, even if they're flawed or outdated. The brain does this because it's easier to maintain familiar beliefs than to process new or challenging information. For example, if someone believes in a particular political ideology, they are more likely to seek out news sources that align with their views and dismiss those that contradict them. This is why people become entrenched in their beliefs, often refusing to consider opposing viewpoints, even in the face of compelling evidence. 12. Your brain can trick you into thinking you've seen something before. This is known as déjà vu, the feeling that you've experienced a situation before, even if it's completely new. The brain can sometimes mix up memories or create an illusion of familiarity when processing new experiences. This happens because the brain has two primary pathways for memory formation: short-term and long-term memory. When a new experience closely resembles something you've encountered before, your brain can mistakenly file it as a known event, even though it's occurring for the first time. While déjà vu is not fully understood, it's believed to occur when there's a delay between processing short-term and long-term memory, leading to a mix-up. 13. People remember faces more than names. This is because the brain has specialized regions dedicated to recognizing faces. The fusiform face area in the brain is particularly adept at distinguishing faces, allowing you to recognize someone you've met even after a long period of time. In contrast, remembering names involves different regions of the brain that require more cognitive effort. This is why people often struggle to recall someone's name, even if they can recognize their face instantly. The human brain places a stronger emphasis on facial recognition because it is a critical skill for social interactions, helping us identify friends, family, and potential threats in our environment. 14. People tend to make decisions based on how information is framed. The framing effect refers to the way information is presented and how it influences decision-making. The brain is highly sensitive to how facts are framed, and even subtle changes in language can lead people to make different decisions. For example, if a doctor says that 90% of patients survive a surgery, patients are more likely to choose the surgery than if the doctor says that 10% of patients die from it. The brain interprets the same information in a more positive light when it's framed in terms of success rather than failure. This bias can significantly influence everything from consumer choices to life-altering decisions, as people react more to how information is presented than to the actual facts. 15. Your brain is more likely to remember the first and last parts of an experience. This phenomenon is known as the serial position effect, and it explains why you tend to remember the beginning and end of an event more vividly than the middle. The brain encodes information in a way that makes the first and last parts of an experience stand out. For example, in a meeting, the first impression you make and the last point you leave people with are more likely to be remembered than the middle part of your presentation. This effect is particularly strong in situations like speeches, interviews, or even casual conversations, where the opening and closing moments are crucial in shaping how the entire experience is perceived. 16. People tend to perceive themselves more positively than others do. This is known as the self-serving bias, a tendency for people to attribute their successes to their own abilities and their failures to external factors. The brain is wired to protect the ego, which is why we're more likely to remember our own positive actions and minimize our mistakes. For example, if you perform well in a test, you might think it's because of your hard work or intelligence, but if you fail, you may blame the exam's difficulty or other people. This bias helps maintain self-esteem, but can also distort reality, leading to overconfidence or the refusal to acknowledge areas of improvement. 17. Your brain is wired to find patterns even when they don't exist. Humans are exceptional pattern seekers, and this ability has been crucial for survival. The brain is constantly looking for connections and meanings in the world around us. This tendency can lead to pareidolia, the phenomenon where people see faces in clouds or objects in random patterns. While this skill was essential for spotting potential threats in the environment, like predators or changes in weather, it also makes us see patterns that aren't there. For example, people might believe in conspiracy theories or supernatural events because their brains are programmed to find connections, even when they don't exist. 18. People make decisions based on the availability heuristic, relying on easily recalled information. When making decisions, the brain tends to rely on the availability heuristic, a mental shortcut where we base our judgments on how easily something comes to mind. If something is readily available in your memory, whether it's a recent experience, news story, or conversation, it is more likely to influence your decision-making, even if it isn't the most representative or rational choice. For example, if you've recently seen news reports about airplane crashes, you may feel that air travel is more dangerous than it actually is, even though, statistically, it is one of the safest modes of transportation. This is because your brain is giving more weight to easily available examples, rather than assessing the actual risk. 19. People tend to be more empathetic when they hear about specific, rather than general suffering. The brain is wired to feel more empathy for individuals than for large groups. This is why you might feel deeply moved when you hear about a person suffering, but less so when you hear about a large-scale tragedy. This phenomenon is called the identifiable victim effect. When people hear about a single person's plight, the brain can emotionally connect to the individual, seeing them as relatable. In contrast, large-scale issues like poverty, war, or climate change can feel abstract and distant, making it harder for the brain to empathize. As a result, people are more likely to take action or donate when they feel a personal connection to a specific person rather than a vague or faceless group. 20. Your brain is more likely to remember traumatic events in vivid detail. The brain stores memories associated with strong emotional responses, especially traumatic events, more vividly than those linked to neutral experiences. This is because the amygdala, which processes emotions like fear and anxiety, plays a significant role in memory formation. When you experience something traumatic, the brain makes a stronger connection to that event, encoding it with sensory details and emotional cues. This heightened memory storage helps with survival, as remembering dangerous situations can help you avoid similar threats in the future. However, this also means that traumatic experiences can haunt you, with memories resurfacing unexpectedly, often with intense emotional weight. 21. People tend to overestimate how much others notice them. This is called the spotlight effect, where individuals believe they are the focus of everyone's attention, even when they're not. The brain tends to magnify our own actions and appearance, making us feel more self-conscious or anxious. For example, if you trip in public, you may feel like everyone is staring at you, but in reality, most people are focused on their own concerns and haven't even noticed. The spotlight effect occurs because the brain is designed to be hyper-aware of how we are perceived by others, but this can lead to overestimating the attention we actually receive. 22. Your brain tends to remember mistakes more vividly than successes. Humans have evolved to be more sensitive to failure than to success, a survival mechanism designed to help avoid future mistakes. This is why you can remember the one time you failed a test or made a mistake in a social situation far more clearly than the many times you succeeded. The brain prioritizes negative experiences to protect us from repeating them. This is a double-edged sword, however. While it helps us learn from our mistakes, it can also lead to unnecessary stress or negative self-reflection, as we focus more on our failures than on our successes. 23. People are more likely to make decisions based on emotion than logic. The brain is deeply emotional, and emotions often drive decision-making more powerfully than logic. When you're in an emotional state, such as stress or excitement, the amygdala overrides the rational thought process of the prefrontal cortex. This explains why people sometimes make impulsive or emotionally driven choices, like buying something they don't need or reacting aggressively in an argument. Emotions shape how we view options, risks, and rewards. This is why marketing, advertising, and even political campaigns often rely heavily on emotional appeal. People are more likely to act based on how they feel than on the facts presented. 24. The brain's default mode network is active when you're doing nothing. The default mode network, DMN, is a group of brain regions that are active when you're not focused on an external task, like when you're daydreaming, reflecting, or engaging in internal thought. The DMN is crucial for self-reflection, creativity, and memory consolidation, and it helps the brain organize and process past experiences. While the DMN has often been associated with mind-wandering, recent studies suggest that it's essential for problem-solving and creative thinking. Many people report having their best ideas when they are not consciously focused on anything at all, such as in the shower or before falling asleep. 25. People's moral behavior is influenced by how they're reminded of moral standards. Research has shown that when people are reminded of their moral values, whether through reminders, subtle cues, or even just exposure to moral stories, they are more likely to behave in line with those standards. This is due to the priming effect, where exposure to certain stimuli activates related thoughts or behaviors. For instance, people are more likely to behave honestly when they're reminded of concepts like fairness or integrity. The brain is highly sensitive to social and ethical norms, and subtle reminders can have a strong influence on moral decision-making. Everyone believes they understand why people act the way they do, but the truth is, the mind works in fascinating and mysterious ways. Every action, behavior, and thought is influenced by complex psychological forces we often don't even notice. Let's dive into some psychological facts that reveal the hidden truths behind human behaviour. 1. Your brain is constantly predicting what's going to happen next. The human brain is like a prediction machine. It's constantly taking in information from the environment and using it to anticipate what's next. This process helps you act more efficiently and react faster to your surroundings. When you walk into a room and someone smiles at you, your brain doesn't just perceive that person's facial expression in the present, it's already making a prediction based on your past experiences. It predicts that this person is friendly or that something positive is about to happen, so you respond in kind. This predictive mechanism not only saves mental energy, but also allows us to anticipate threats. The brain's ability to predict based on past events can explain why you sometimes feel like you knew something was going to happen even before it did. It's your brain's way of making the world more understandable and navigable. 2. Your emotions can influence your memory. Memories are not as fixed as they may seem. While we like to think of memories as clear snapshots of past events, they are often influenced by our emotional states at the time of recall. The brain is highly emotional when it comes to storing memories. Events tied to intense emotions, whether positive or negative, tend to be remembered more vividly than neutral events. For instance, if you were extremely happy or sad during a particular moment, your brain is more likely to encode that event with greater detail. However, the emotions that come with the memory can distort it over time. The brain tends to fill in gaps with emotion-laden information, which can make certain memories feel more intense or more important than they might have originally been. This emotional imprint on memories can sometimes cause us to recall events with a sense of nostalgia or, conversely, with regret, even if the facts of the event don't align with how we feel about it now. 3. People tend to remember faces better than names. This is because the brain is specialized in facial recognition. There are specific neural regions, like the fusiform face area, that are dedicated to identifying faces. Over time, humans have evolved to be exceptionally good at distinguishing faces, which was crucial for social bonding and survival. This ability allows us to instantly recognize friends and acquaintances and assess emotional cues from others. However, when it comes to names, our brains rely on different systems for memory that require more effort and cognitive energy. As a result, people often struggle to recall names, especially when meeting a lot of new faces at once. This is why, even if you can recognize someone immediately, you might not recall their name right away. It's not that you're forgetful, it's just the way your brain processes visual information versus verbal information. 4. Your brain can trick you into believing something that isn't true. The brain is designed to make quick decisions based on available information. However, this means it can also fall prey to cognitive biases. For example, the brain has a tendency to believe things that fit its existing beliefs, even when there is no factual basis for those beliefs. The confirmation bias is a perfect example of this. This bias causes us to look for evidence that supports what we already think, ignoring or dismissing information that contradicts our views. This is why it's so difficult to change someone's mind once they've formed an opinion. They're not consciously resisting new information, but their brain is naturally filtering out anything that doesn't align with their preconceptions. This mechanism helped humans survive by making decisions quickly, but in today's complex world, it can sometimes lead to errors in judgment and reasoning. 5. People are more likely to follow the behaviour of others when they're uncertain. Humans are inherently social creatures, and we often look to others for guidance when we're unsure about how to behave. This is particularly true in ambiguous situations. The brain naturally seeks social validation and cues from others to make sense of uncertain circumstances. For example, if you're in an unfamiliar place, like a foreign country, and you don't know how to behave, you'll likely look to the locals to guide your actions. This instinct is known as social proof, and it helps individuals fit in with groups and avoid standing out. It's why trends and social movements can spread quickly. People look to others to determine what's acceptable or popular, even if they don't fully understand the rationale behind it. The brain uses social proof as a shortcut to help you make quick decisions without having to process every detail. 6. The halo effect causes us to make sweeping judgments based on first impressions. When we notice one positive trait in a person, whether it's their physical appearance, kindness, or confidence, we often assume they have other positive qualities as well. This is called the halo effect, and it can significantly distort our judgment. For instance, if someone is attractive, we might subconsciously assume they're also smart or friendly, even if we have no evidence to support that assumption. On the flip side, if someone has a negative first impression, we may think they're rude or incompetent, even if their actions don't entirely support that view. The halo effect shows how our brains tend to generalize based on limited information, and it can cause us to overlook other important factors that don't align with our initial impressions. 7. Fear can make your brain more focused. When faced with a threatening or dangerous situation, the brain releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These chemicals sharpen your focus, increase alertness, and prepare your body for fight or flight responses. This reaction, while essential for survival, can also make you more alert and focused on the task at hand. This is why some people perform better under pressure. Fear can block out distractions and make you concentrate intensely on the immediate threat. However, while fear can increase focus, chronic fear or anxiety can have the opposite effect. Over time, prolonged stress can actually impair cognitive function and reduce your ability to make clear decisions. 8. Your brain struggles to differentiate between a real and imagined experience. The power of the mind is extraordinary. When you vividly imagine an experience, whether it's a joyful moment, a stressful situation, or even something as mundane as eating your favorite food, your brain processes it as if it were actually happening. This phenomenon is why athletes use visualization techniques to improve performance. When they imagine performing well, the brain activates similar neural pathways to those used when actually performing the action. The same concept applies to negative experiences. Imagining a stressful event can create a real sense of anxiety and fear, which is why thoughts can sometimes feel like tangible experiences. The brain is not always aware of the difference between what's real and what's imagined, which can have a significant impact on our emotional and physical states. 9. People are more likely to act impulsively when they're tired. When you're tired, your brain doesn't process information as efficiently as it does when you're well rested. Sleep deprivation impairs decision-making by weakening the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational thinking and self-control. This makes it harder to weigh the consequences of your actions, leading to impulsive behavior. For example, when you're tired, you might make unhealthy food choices, skip a workout, or make a risky decision without considering the long-term effects. That's why experts recommend getting enough sleep, not just for physical health, but also for mental clarity and emotional regulation. 10. People are more likely to remember the beginning and the end of an experience. This phenomenon, known as the serial position effect, refers to the tendency to remember the first and last parts of an event more vividly than the middle. This bias has profound implications for everything from job interviews to speeches to relationships. If you start strong and finish well, people are more likely to remember the experience overall, even if the middle is forgettable. This is why your opening statement in a presentation is crucial. It sets the tone, and if you finish with something memorable, you'll leave a lasting impression. 11. Your brain tends to focus on negative information more than positive. This is known as negativity bias, a natural tendency for your brain to give more weight to negative experiences than positive ones. From an evolutionary standpoint, this bias helped our ancestors focus on threats or dangers in order to survive. As a result, negative experiences, whether it's a harsh comment or a stressful event, tend to stick in your memory longer than positive experiences. This bias affects your everyday life, making you more sensitive to criticism than compliments. It's why one negative comment can overshadow numerous positive ones, and why bad events often feel more significant than good ones. Overcoming this bias requires conscious effort to shift focus to the positive, but doing so can improve mental resilience and well-being. 12. Your brain can get addicted to stress. While we often think of addiction as being linked to substances like alcohol or drugs, the brain can also become addicted to stress. The rush of adrenaline and cortisol during stressful moments can feel addictive, making you crave that intensity even when it's harmful. People who thrive on high-pressure situations, or those who constantly face deadlines, may feel a sense of exhilaration from stress. Over time, this can lead to unhealthy patterns of behaviour, where the body becomes so used to being in a state of heightened stress that it becomes difficult to feel relaxed. Learning to manage stress and finding balance is crucial to breaking this cycle and protecting mental health. 13. The human brain can't focus on multiple tasks at once. This is a common misconception. While you may think you're multitasking, your brain is actually switching back and forth between tasks. This switching takes cognitive resources and reduces efficiency, which can lead to mistakes. When you're juggling multiple tasks, you're dividing your attention across them, and as a result, each task suffers in terms of quality and focus. Studies have shown that multitasking can even lower IQ temporarily and increase mental fatigue. Instead of multitasking, focusing on one thing at a time can increase productivity and improve performance across the board. The brain works best when it can dedicate full attention to one task rather than splitting its focus. 14. Your brain has a limited capacity for decision-making. The paradox of choice explains why having too many options can actually lead to stress and indecision. The brain has a finite amount of cognitive resources, and constantly making decisions drains these resources. As a result, when faced with too many choices, the brain becomes overwhelmed, leading to a decision-making paralysis or the decision to opt for the easiest option. This is why people often feel overwhelmed by long shopping lists or complicated tasks. They have to use a significant amount of cognitive energy to make decisions, which can lead to exhaustion and poor choices. To combat this, reducing the number of options or simplifying choices can enhance clarity and improve decision-making. 15. People tend to remember faces more than names. This is due to the specialized processing systems in the brain designed for face recognition. Our brains are equipped with areas specifically dedicated to recognizing faces, making it easier to spot a familiar face in a crowd, even after a long time. In contrast, names don't have the same specialized neural systems, and they require more cognitive effort to recall. While faces are processed in the fusiform face area, names are stored and retrieved from the brain's memory systems, which are not as specialized. This is why you can easily recognize a person you've met before, but remembering their name takes more time and effort. 16. People make snap judgments based on appearance. The brain is constantly making quick judgments about others, often within milliseconds of meeting someone. This phenomenon, known as thin slicing, is when the brain makes rapid decisions based on limited information, such as someone's facial expression, body language, or voice tone. These snap judgments often occur unconsciously and can shape the way we interact with people, sometimes even before we know anything about them. While this can be useful in making quick decisions in social situations, it can also lead to biases and misjudgments based on appearance alone, which is why it's important to challenge first impressions and give people a chance to reveal more about themselves. 17. Your brain responds more to negative feedback than positive feedback. This is another example of the brain's negativity bias, where negative experiences, such as criticism or failure, activate stronger emotional responses and are stored more vividly in memory. In contrast, positive feedback tends to be processed in a more neutral or less intense way. The reason for this is rooted in survival instincts. Negative feedback or criticism could represent a threat, so the brain prioritizes it in order to prevent future mistakes. This can be frustrating, as we tend to focus on our flaws or failures rather than our successes. To improve resilience, it's important to consciously focus on the positive and balance negative feedback with affirmations of success. 18. Humans are wired to be social creatures. The brain is hardwired to seek connection with others, as social bonding has played a critical role in human survival. The release of oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, helps foster trust, empathy, and attachment between individuals. This is why social interactions, whether they're with family, friends, or even strangers, can lift your mood and improve your mental health. The need for social connection is so strong that people who are isolated or lack close relationships often experience symptoms similar to physical pain. This underscores the importance of nurturing social bonds for both emotional and physical well-being. 19. The brain's default mode network is active when you're doing nothing. When your mind is at rest, like during daydreaming or idle moments, the brain's default mode network, DMN, is activated. This network is involved in processes like mind-wandering, self-reflection, and social cognition. While the DMN is often associated with idle moments, it's actually important for problem-solving and creative thinking. Many people have moments of insight or come up with their best ideas when they're not focused on anything specific. This is why sometimes the best ideas come to you when you're doing something mundane, like walking or taking a shower. Your brain is allowing itself to make connections that it doesn't have the mental space for when it's focused on tasks. 20. People can pick up on micro-expressions that reveal hidden emotions. Micro-expressions are tiny, involuntary facial expressions that occur within a fraction of a second. These expressions can reveal hidden emotions, such as anger, fear, or disgust, even when someone is trying to hide them. The human brain is highly attuned to these subtle cues, often recognizing them without conscious awareness. This is why you can sometimes sense when someone is lying or feeling uncomfortable, even if they're trying to appear calm or composed. Being able to read these micro-expressions gives humans an evolutionary advantage, allowing us to detect potential threats or deception in social situations. 21. Your brain can trick you into thinking something is familiar. This is known as the familiarity heuristic, and it happens when you perceive something or someone as familiar simply because it resembles something you've encountered before. The brain tends to make these quick judgments to conserve energy and avoid overthinking. However, this can also lead to false memories or mistaken recognition. For example, you might feel that someone is familiar because their face or voice reminds you of a friend or family member, even though you've never met them. The brain's reliance on familiarity can be helpful for quick decision-making, but it can also lead to misidentifications or biases. 22. Your brain is constantly judging the emotions of others. Humans are exceptional at reading other people's emotions, even when they don't speak a word. The brain uses both conscious and subconscious processes to decode facial expressions, body language, and vocal tones to determine how someone is feeling. This ability to quickly assess others' emotional states is essential for social interactions, as it helps you respond appropriately in different situations. The mirror neurons in your brain allow you to feel empathy and react to another person's emotional state almost instantly, which is why you can often feel someone's pain or joy just by observing them. 23. Stress can actually improve your performance in the short term. Stress isn't always harmful. In small doses, Stress can sharpen your focus and enhance your performance, especially in high-stakes situations. This is because stress activates the fight or flight response, releasing adrenaline and cortisol that heighten your alertness, increase your heart rate, and prepare your body for action. This heightened state of arousal can help you perform well during presentations, exams, or sports events. However, chronic stress can have detrimental effects on the brain, leading to burnout, anxiety, and physical health issues. It's all about balance. Stress can be useful for motivation, but long-term exposure can overwhelm the system. 24. The brain needs downtime to function optimally. While it may seem counterintuitive, the brain is not built for constant work or stimulation. Just like the body, the brain needs rest and recovery to function properly. Studies show that taking breaks, especially in the form of naps, can significantly improve focus, memory, and learning. The brain uses downtime to consolidate memories and integrate information. Without rest, cognitive function diminishes and productivity decreases. This is why taking short breaks throughout the day and getting adequate sleep is crucial for maintaining mental sharpness and overall brain health. 25. People tend to seek social validation from others. Humans have an innate desire to be liked and accepted by others, which is why we often seek validation in the form of compliments, likes on social media, or approval from peers. The brain's dopamine system rewards us when we receive positive feedback, which reinforces the desire for social acceptance. This need for validation is so strong that it can influence decisions, behaviours, and self-worth. While it's normal to want approval, too much reliance on external validation can lead to anxiety and insecurity. True self-esteem comes from internal validation, not just from what others think of you. The human mind is an endlessly fascinating puzzle, constantly shaping the way we interact with the world and with each other. While we like to think of ourselves as rational beings, the truth is that much of our behaviour is shaped by hidden psychological forces, many of which we don't even recognise. Here are some psychological facts that reveal the intricate workings of our brains, offering a deeper understanding of how we think, feel, and act. 1. The brain craves certainty and struggles with uncertainty. Your brain is wired to seek out certainty, primarily because uncertainty triggers anxiety. When faced with unfamiliar or ambiguous situations, the brain becomes stressed, leading to a sense of discomfort. This reaction stems from our evolutionary history. Uncertainty in the environment often meant danger, and knowing what to expect helped our ancestors survive. In modern life, uncertainty can come in many forms, whether it's about the future, relationships, or decisions at work, and the brain will often attempt to reduce this anxiety by seeking out clear answers. This explains why people may often resort to making quick, sometimes incorrect decisions to avoid the discomfort of not knowing what comes next. 2. Your brain is hardwired to see faces, even in random patterns. Humans have a unique ability to recognize faces, a skill that is so crucial for social interactions and survival that your brain has specialized areas dedicated to it. These areas are known as the fusiform face area, which allows you to recognize and process faces quickly and accurately. In fact, your brain is so attuned to faces that it can sometimes see faces even where they don't exist. This phenomenon is called pareidolia. For example, you might see a face in the clouds or in a random arrangement of objects. This is the brain's way of processing information that it finds most relevant. Faces are one of the first things we look for in the environment, as recognizing faces quickly can have life or death implications. 3. People tend to act more impulsively when they're tired. Sleep deprivation has a profound effect on your ability to make sound decisions. When you're tired, your brain's prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for rational thought, planning, and impulse control, becomes less effective. As a result, you're more likely to make hasty, emotional decisions without fully considering the consequences. This explains why people often act impulsively when they're sleep deprived, whether it's indulging in unhealthy food, skipping a workout, or making snap judgments in difficult situations. Chronic sleep deprivation can lead to long-term cognitive issues, affecting everything from memory to emotional regulation. 4. The brain processes negative emotions more intensely than positive ones. The negativity bias is a well-documented psychological phenomenon that explains why negative events tend to stick in our minds longer than positive ones. From an evolutionary standpoint, our brains are more sensitive to negative experiences because they often signal potential threats or danger, which required immediate attention and action. This bias helped early humans survive in hostile environments by prioritizing threats over rewards. Today, this tendency can lead to disproportionate emotional reactions to criticism, setbacks, or negative events. For instance, a single criticism can overshadow a dozen compliments, making it harder to focus on the positive aspects of life. 5. Your memory is influenced by the context in which you recall it. Memory isn't a perfect recording of events. It's often malleable and influenced by context, emotions, and the passage of time. When you recall a memory, your brain doesn't replay it like a video. It reconstructs it based on fragments of sensory information, emotions, and your current state of mind. This is why memories can change over time. New information, even subtle suggestions or social cues, can reshape the way you remember things. For example, if you're told by a friend that a particular event was fun, you might begin to remember it as more enjoyable than you initially did. This phenomenon also explains why two people can experience the same event and have completely different memories of it, influenced by their emotions, perceptions, and post-event discussions. 6. People's behavior can be heavily influenced by the presence of others. Humans are naturally social creatures, and our behavior is often shaped by those around us. This is especially true when we're in groups or in the presence of authority figures. Social influence can take many forms: conformity, peer pressure, and obedience. Research on group behavior shows that people often change their actions to align with the group's norms, even if they don't fully agree with them. This is called conformity, and it happens because the brain seeks social acceptance and fears rejection. In situations where there's ambiguity or uncertainty, people are more likely to look to others for guidance, which often leads to groupthink, where the desire for harmony in a group leads to irrational or dysfunctional decision-making. 7. The brain thrives on novelty, but also needs routine. While the brain enjoys novel experiences because new things stimulate dopamine production, which is tied to motivation and pleasure, it also benefits from routines. In fact, when you develop a routine, the brain experiences reduced cognitive load because it doesn't have to work as hard to make decisions. Daily routines free up mental energy, allowing you to focus on more complex tasks. However, the brain can become complacent with too much routine, which can lead to a feeling of mental stagnation or boredom. This is why it's important to balance the benefits of routine with occasional novel experiences, which stimulate creativity, learning, and excitement. 8. People often underestimate the impact of their social circle on their behavior. The people around you significantly shape your behavior, attitudes, and even your health. Research shows that individuals are more likely to adopt the habits, attitudes, and lifestyles of their social circle than they realize. This is due to social contagion, where behaviors spread within a network of people, much like a virus. If you're surrounded by individuals who have healthy habits, you're more likely to adopt those habits yourself. Conversely, if your social circle engages in unhealthy behaviors, you're more likely to follow suit, even if you're not consciously aware of it. This underscores the importance of choosing your social environment wisely. It can be one of the most powerful influences on your health and happiness. 9. Your brain prefers easy-to-process information. Humans are cognitive misers, our brains prefer to conserve mental energy whenever possible. This means that when we're faced with complex or ambiguous information, we tend to simplify it in order to process it more easily. For example, when you read a headline or see an advertisement, your brain automatically reduces the complexity of the information to fit your existing knowledge. This is why catchy slogans, visuals, and simple messages are so effective in advertising and communication. When information is easy to understand, the brain processes it more efficiently, and we're more likely to accept it without questioning it. 10. People are more likely to stick with a decision when they've invested time or effort into it. This psychological phenomenon is known as effort justification. When you invest significant time, energy, or money into something, your brain tends to place a higher value on it, even if the outcome is less than ideal. This is why people who spend hours building something or working on a project are more likely to see it as valuable or worthwhile, even if the result doesn't live up to expectations. Effort justification can be seen in everything from relationships to consumer behaviour to personal projects. The more effort you put into something, the more you tend to justify and rationalise its worth. 11. Your brain is biased toward visual information. Humans process visual stimuli significantly faster than auditory or textual information. In fact, studies have shown that the brain can process visual input in as little as 13 milliseconds. This rapid processing is one of the reasons why visual content, such as images, videos, or even body language, has a much greater impact than words alone. Visual stimuli are processed in the visual cortex, which is designed to quickly decode and interpret images. In contrast, verbal or textual information takes longer to process, as it involves more complex cognitive systems. This explains why people are often drawn to pictures or infographics over lengthy explanations or articles. 12. Stress can be contagious in a group setting. If one person in a group becomes stressed or anxious, it can quickly spread to others. This phenomenon, known as emotional contagion, happens because the brain is wired to pick up on emotional cues from those around us. The brain's mirror neurons allow us to empathize with others by mimicking their emotional state. This is why you can often sense when someone else is anxious or stressed, even if they haven't said anything. In a group setting, if one person expresses fear or frustration, it can trigger similar emotions in others, creating a collective sense of stress. This is why team leaders or group members with high emotional intelligence can play such an important role in managing group dynamics. 13. Your brain uses context to fill in the blanks of a conversation. When you're talking to someone, your brain doesn't process every word they say in isolation. Instead, it uses context, everything from body language to previous conversations, to fill in the gaps. This is why we can understand phrases like, "He's a little under the weather," even if we don't know the exact details. The brain takes cues from the broader context and infers meaning from past experiences and social norms. This helps us make sense of ambiguous or incomplete information in real-time conversations. However, it also means that misunderstandings can occur if the context is unclear or if the listener's expectations don't match the speaker's intent. Misinterpretations happen because our brains are constantly making assumptions about the meaning of words, even when they're not explicitly stated. 14. People tend to feel a sense of control when they have choices, but too many options can lead to anxiety. The brain likes having control over its environment, and having choices gives you the sense that you're in charge of your actions. However, too many options can actually paralyze decision-making, leading to what's called choice overload. When you're presented with a large number of choices, your brain has to work harder to evaluate each one, which can lead to confusion and dissatisfaction. This phenomenon is often seen in scenarios like shopping, choosing a restaurant, or even choosing a career path. When there are too many options, the brain becomes overwhelmed and can end up feeling anxious or dissatisfied, even after making a decision. Interestingly, people tend to be happier when they have just a few options to choose from, as it reduces the pressure and makes the decision-making process feel more manageable. 15. Your brain doesn't fully form until you're in your 20s. The brain is constantly developing, and it doesn't reach full maturity until a person is in their mid to late 20s. One of the last areas to fully develop is the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision-making, impulse control, and understanding the long-term consequences of actions. This is why teenagers and young adults often make decisions that seem impulsive or reckless to older generations. They simply lack the neurological development needed to fully understand the future impact of their actions. This period of development also helps explain why young adults are more likely to engage in risky behaviours, like experimenting with substances or making spontaneous decisions, while older individuals tend to think more carefully before acting. 16. People are more likely to remember things that are emotionally significant. The brain prioritizes emotionally charged experiences because they are deemed more important for survival. Events that trigger strong emotions, whether joy, fear, anger, or love, are stored more deeply in memory than neutral events. This is why you remember a wedding, a death, or a traumatic event with far greater detail than an average day. The brain releases dopamine, norepinephrine, and cortisol depending on the emotion, which help lock those memories in place. The heightened emotional state during significant events makes the memory vivid and harder to forget. This emotional connection also helps shape how we narrate our own life stories, often focusing more on the emotional peaks and valleys rather than the mundane moments in between. 17. People are more likely to conform when they feel insecure or uncertain. The need for social acceptance is deeply ingrained in human nature. When people feel unsure about how to behave in a particular social context, they often look to others for cues on how to act. This is known as social conformity. The brain tends to follow social norms when we feel uncertain about a situation, which is why peer pressure and groupthink can be so influential. For example, when you enter a new group or workplace, the brain subconsciously evaluates the behavior of others and adapts accordingly. This drive to conform helps us fit into social groups and avoid social rejection, but it can also lead to uncritical decision-making, especially when it comes to sensitive or controversial issues. 18. Your brain is constantly assessing risk, even in situations where you feel safe. Humans are always on the lookout for potential threats. It's part of our survival instinct. This constant risk assessment occurs even when we feel comfortable and safe. For example, while walking down the street, your brain is subconsciously scanning your environment for any signs of danger, like someone walking too close behind you or a suspicious-looking object. The brain's amygdala, which processes fear and potential threats, is always at work, even in neutral or relaxing situations. This is why certain sounds or situations, like hearing sirens or witnessing an argument, can suddenly spike your heart rate or make you feel uneasy. Your brain doesn't wait for you to consciously recognize the danger, it reacts instinctively. 19. People tend to overestimate their control over random events. The brain has a tendency to believe it can control events that are, in reality, random. This is called the illusion of control. It's why people throw salt over their shoulders after spilling some, or why gamblers believe that certain superstitions can affect their odds of winning. The brain craves control, and in an uncertain world, it looks for patterns that don't exist. This illusion helps the brain feel more secure and less anxious about uncontrollable factors. However, this overestimation can lead to poor decision-making, especially in situations involving chance. It's why people often engage in behaviours that they believe will influence outcomes when, in fact, those outcomes are largely random or outside their control. 20. Dopamine plays a crucial role in motivation, not just pleasure. Dopamine is widely known as the pleasure chemical, but it's also crucial in motivating you to pursue rewards. The brain releases dopamine not just when you receive a reward, but also when you expect a reward or when you're working toward a goal. It's why you feel motivated to complete tasks, pursue goals, and seek out new experiences. The anticipation of a reward triggers the release of dopamine, which creates feelings of excitement and motivation to keep moving forward. This is why people who set and work toward clear goals often feel a surge of energy and satisfaction as they approach those goals. Without dopamine, tasks would feel less rewarding and motivation would decrease. 21. People are more likely to act based on how something is framed. The way information is presented significantly influences how we perceive and respond to it. This is known as framing effect. The way a message is framed can change people's choices and decisions, even when the underlying facts are the same. For example, people tend to prefer a product labeled as having a 90% success rate over one with a 10% failure rate, even though both phrases describe the same outcome. The brain is highly sensitive to how things are framed, making us more susceptible to marketing tactics and persuasive messaging. This psychological principle is why advertisements, political speeches, and media outlets often frame issues in specific ways to influence public opinion or behaviour. 22. Your brain interprets silence as discomfort or a request to speak. Silence can be incredibly uncomfortable for many people, especially in social situations. The brain experiences silence as a gap in communication that needs to be filled, and this discomfort often leads people to speak out during awkward pauses. In conversation, if someone remains silent, your brain often interprets this as a prompt to continue or to offer your own thoughts. This is why people tend to over-explain things in group settings, or why there's a rush to fill pauses with words. Silence, while powerful and essential for processing thoughts, is often viewed as an opportunity for the brain to keep the flow of social interaction moving. 23. The brain is constantly rewiring itself based on experiences. Neuroplasticity is a remarkable property of the brain that allows it to adapt, learn, and change. Every time you learn something new, encounter a new experience, or practice a skill, your brain rewires itself to accommodate that new information. This means that, even as you age, the brain continues to form new connections and strengthen old ones, which is why cognitive exercises and learning are so beneficial. While the brain is highly adaptable, it can also reinforce bad habits if you're not conscious of the behaviours you're cultivating. The brain's ability to rewire itself means that we are never too old to learn or change. 24. The halo effect makes you judge someone based on one positive trait. The halo effect occurs when you assume that because someone is good at one thing, they must be good at other things as well. For example, if a person is attractive, you might assume they are also smart, friendly, or talented, even if there is no evidence to support this. The brain tends to overgeneralize traits based on first impressions or one standout feature. This cognitive bias is not limited to attractiveness. It can apply to other positive traits like competence or likability. While this can sometimes be helpful in making quick judgments, it also leads to unfair assumptions and the overlooking of important information. 25. Your environment can impact your mental and physical health more than you think. The environment you live in plays a significant role in your mental and physical well-being. Whether it's the design of your home, the people you interact with, or even the weather, your surroundings have a profound effect on your mood, productivity, and health. For example, studies have shown that spending time in nature can lower stress levels, improve focus, and boost overall mood. Similarly, a cluttered, chaotic environment can increase anxiety and decrease your ability to focus. The brain thrives in organized, calming environments, but it's constantly processing the sensory input it receives from the world around it, which influences everything from sleep patterns to energy levels.